Hi, hey, hello. Welcome to episode 14 of Trail Society, brought to you by our friends over at Strava, the number one app for runners and cyclists. I'm Corinne Malcolm,
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
and I'm the only one not in my house today. I'm in the great Abby, and that's a Dylan Bowman intro right there. The great Abby Hall and Cordis Hall's house in Flagstaff, Arizona, where it is sunny and chilly. But today we're diving into another Strava segment story. And we're thrilled to actually let you know that the first round of these films and articles is now live. You'll find them linked in our show notes and shared across our social media platforms, including the very cool video of our own Hillary Allen. If you've not checked it out yet, you should. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. You're going to love it. But more than anything, if you would like to subscribe to see all these features, to build your own segment stories, to track your own Strava segments, sign up for a Strava subscription for just $5 a month, and join us over there, chasing your own segments. I guess one thing we promised last time is that we try to recap what we knew about athletes moving to different sponsors thus far. And in talking with some friends on my end, I do think that we're going to see either people re-signing for longer term contracts this season, staying put, myself included in that, or moving companies, maybe more so than we've seen in years past, in part because the pandemic actually extended a lot of contracts by a year. They basically, they bumped things out a year due to kind of losing a year in a lot of ways. And so I'm wondering, I mean, Hillary, you've made an announcement recently. Can you share a little bit about where you've moved to? And then we'll talk a little bit more about kind of what's going on with these brand discussions.
Yeah, so I moved over to Brooks from North Face. I mean, if we want more detail about it, you can go and check over Dylan's podcast. We had a cool little discussion about all things Brooks trail running. So that was a pretty big change. I mean, obviously, it's a big deal to stick on with the sponsor, but also to change because it's just a new team, a new environment. But I'm really excited. I've a 3-year contract with Brooks, so I'm super excited to see, what we can do together on trails, and super happy I can run in these shoes.
Yeah. And I think that kind of stems from the bigger discussion too. And you and Dylan talked about this someone on that in that interview, was like, why do people leave? Why do people leave? Why do we see changes in the contract world? What does it look like for the athletes? What does it look like for the brand? I know one of those discussions with athletes is oftentimes too, like how much control the brand has or doesn't have over you, how much independence you have, how much like, are you allowed to be authentic to yourself? Do you get to race the races that you want to do? Everyone's contracts look different. Like there are contracts that do say like, okay, these are the races that we want you to go to, or we want you to go to 2 of this list of things. You have to go to 2 of these, or the world's your oyster. Here's your travel budget, but you need to stay within that. So that it's going to look different. And I think that, to your point too, it's different phases in your life, different phases in your own, not just your running career, but your kind of your personal life trajectory. And I think that does play a big factor into beyond product, beyond even like that, like necessarily like that financial commitment to an athlete.
Yeah. And I think 5 years ago, you would have asked me like if I would be doing this now, and I would have said no. I would not have known that my life trajectory would have gone this way. But I think I got to a point in my life where I was able to consider the possibility of running full time and while taking just some classes and stuff. And so it's given me this opportunity to kind of take a little bit of a different direction with things. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, and other things too. I mean, as you mentioned, product still is a big part of that, right? And for me, with someone we just saw my Strava segment story, I mean, I've had a lot of injuries, right? And so a shoe and gear that I can run in is incredibly important to me. And so I think sometimes if there's new innovation, and that's awesome that certain brands are coming up with different, innovative technologies, but it doesn't work for everyone. And so there can be kind of a line drawn in the sand. And you're kind of forced to look elsewhere. And then I think it can also be an interesting opportunity that you realize that there's actually a lot more out there, perhaps even better opportunities. So
yeah, I mean, the first thing that anyone does when you're talking to like a manager of one of these teams is they say, well, let us send you some shoes, because if you can't run in them,
Yeah.
it's not going to work type of thing. Right. And like your contract with the North Face, for example, was super interesting in the fact that like when you started with the North Face, you weren't required to run in North Face shoes.
Right.
So
Because
all
they
of a
didn't make
sudden,
shoes. Yeah.
yeah. So
Well,
like
they
that
did,
product
but
is
yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like, think about back to like Western States in 2014, maybe 2015, when Rob Cryer won wearing Nikes. Yeah, it's like North Face
Then
didn't
he,
make shoes, or they didn't make great shoes, right? Like they had
yeah.
one shoe. And so, yeah, it's like, first and foremost, represent brands that you believe in the products of, because you're not going to be loving yourself if you're running mile 90 with your feet wanting to fall off because you can't run in the shoes of the company that's supporting you. So, first and foremost, wear their gear, like their gear, like that's probably the most important.
Yeah. And then I find too, I feel like there are different levels of support within any company. And I like to say that they can give you social support, which is oftentimes like using you in marketing campaigns, promoting you, like, you promoting them, then promoting you. And there are very few brands, I think, within trail running that do that super well, to be honest, social support. And then it's financial support and product support. And, generally speaking, like one of those might outweigh. I think, Nike historically, for example, I think has been really good on the product support, but hadn't necessarily been able to financially support their trail team to the fullest extent. I think some of that's changing a little bit, but that's something that people have to weigh out, right? Like you're going to get potentially a lot of product, or maybe you're not. I when I ran for Salomon, it was hard to get product at times, or product that was the right size, or product that fit you. And this was before we had, pipeline issues with getting product into factories and out of factories, and from Europe to North America, from Asia to North America. So I do think, you kind of have to look through those things and what you are getting out of it. And I think the pandemic was a good time to evaluate what did you as an athlete need from it, and what were you expecting to get out of it? Because I think people go in, they chase sponsorships with this idea of like, it's going to make my life better. And it's like, well, is it recognition? Is it confirmation that you're doing well? Like, what do you think you're getting out of it versus what do you actually need and or want to get out of it? And I think a lot of athletes chase these sponsorships without having that fully conceptualized, and that causes like huge issues for people. But I do think, and there are lots of brands that haven't announced runners yet. There are brands like, I can tell you Adidas Terrex, like we're bringing on 3 athletes, but they're all kind of next gen athletes, and then none from the US. We're bringing on 2 athletes from the Southern Hemisphere and a guy who's living in Austria, but they're all next gen young athletes that we're going to kind of, hope to develop over time type of thing, giving them a little bit of support to get to Europe for racing. So really not, they prior, like we were like, okay, we're re-signing all of the athletes contracts that are coming up. So myself, like I was able to re-sign, Abby and Cordis were able to re-sign. Tom was able to resign. So that was kind of a big thing, was like we resigned all of our current athletes, but we didn't really bring on any new names or any big names. And what I've found looking through everything on the interwebs that I found so far, and there are still, I think, announcements to come. Obviously, like Keely's announcement is yet to come. I think we'll see some surprising moves in the coming weeks still from some people, which will be really, really exciting. But big ones I think thus far are Kraft added some new names to their team, including, I think the biggest names there coming in are Tim Ferricks and Ida Nilsson. Like I think that was a great grab for Kraft to bring those 2 athletes on. Kelly Wolf, I thought she was going to go to Dynafit. I was convinced that she was going to Dynafit, but no, she went to La Sportiva, which I think is like a great fit for her as like an all-around mountain athlete. And then 2 young guns are coming onto the North Face team, including my roommate, Olivia Amber, who's a Salomon athlete. And then a name that I think we're going to have to watch out for, this girl, Jennifer Lichter, won the Rut. She's a mountain guide in Glacier all summer, but she ran a 2:39 at CIM this December. Yeah. Like or January, whenever CIM is this winter, like she's really fast. So really, really cool to see kind of some young up and coming athletes that I think have a lot still to kind of, like, we'll see what happens with them. They're racing primarily shorter distances still. And then Adam Mary going to Saucony. And honestly, I was expecting Saucony to like swoop up a couple athletes and like build out their team, because they seem to be wanting to invest in the sport, in talking to Katie Asmith and talking to Grayson Murphy. I was like, Saucony is going to build a team. And they've only announced Adam Mary thus far. And I'm kind of confused that aren't more names attached to Saucony yet. Are there any names that I missed in that you guys have seen particularly in the trail and ultra community?
Nope. Not that
No,
I know of.
the only thing I wanted to add though is Jennifer, right, for the Run the Rut. That was her debut 50K. And
So
she ran the
fast.
third fastest time in history there. So really fast.
Yeah, mountain legs, right? Like that, like the Rut 50K. It's got some runnable stuff for sure, but it also has like a ton of off-trail scree nastiness. And then to turn around and go to CIM and run sub 240, like that to me is like, wow, like range, like very, very exciting. So we'll be keeping an eye on her, I think, in the coming years. Okay. No real races have happened in the past couple of weeks that we've at least, kind of been keeping our eyes on, but right around the corner, we got some golden ticket races coming up. Can you guys kind of break down some big news happened this week with the cancellation of Tarawera? Can one of you explain kind of what's going on then with Black Canyons and Canyons 100K because of that?
Okay, so basically what's happening with the golden tickets is that normally you have these races where you have 2 golden tickets available, right? You place top 2, but now because Tarawera was canceled, they've extended it to 3 golden tickets. So 1 through 3 on the men's and women's side. That's kind of a guaranteed entry into Western states. So that's kind of first kicking off at Black Canyons 100K in Arizona in a couple weeks. So
2 weeks.
Yeah. Which is exciting. I mean, it's a deep field if you haven't seen the start list for Black Canyon. So I think it's pretty exciting to kind of, also keep something local and not have to have the pressure of kind of traveling super far abroad, like early in the season.
Yeah. Well, the goal for Tarawera being a golden ticket was not for Americans to go get those tickets.
Right.
It was for international athletes to get into Western states.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of a bummer, I think, for some international folks or Southern Hemisphere folks to not have that opportunity. But, we can't undo it. So I think I am happy that the board decided to not give those spots to the wait list, for example, and to give those spots to another golden ticket race to maintain as many, as much of a competitive field as possible for Western States Race Day. So that's, to me, that's very exciting to watch that art, like to move those tickets to Black Canyons and Canyons 100K. So in 2 weeks in Arizona and then in April in California, those will be really exciting races to watch. I think like there's fireworks will happen out there.
Yeah, I'm so excited to watch Canyons. I'm going down to race the 50K. And so I'll get to watch the 100K in person.
Nice. In April.
Wait, which canyons?
Canyons 50K.
April. The April. Not Black Canyons, the Canyons endurance runs. Why we chose those 2 races, I don't know. It's very confusing, but here we are. But yeah, there's going to be fireworks. They're both like very hard races. The back half of Black Canyons in 2 weeks is like deceptively hard. People are going to go out too fast. There's so many fast people in the race. Like, and there's this mix of like very established talent in the field. You've got Devin Yanko, Eo Wang, Addie Bracey, Claire Gallagher. And then you have like some newbies who are kind of knocking at the door, like Collier Lawrence. It'll be her first 100K. Keely's got a friend in the race who's not maybe a stranger to this distance, but it'll be kind of, I hope, like a kind of exciting debut in this level of a field. Yeah, it should be really, really cool to see it all play out there. I'm bummed I'm not going to be there in person. I'm like really bummed about that.
Me too. It's always so nice to travel to the desert this time of year.
Yeah, it's not warm yet. I think it's going to be like 60 all week in Sedona.
But
so
60
it's not hot.
feels really warm to me.
Yeah, I know. It's 12 degrees out here in Colorado. So I'm really excited to go down to the desert. So yeah, I'll be out
let
there.
Let the Californian complain about 60 degrees. Not warm enough. The other exciting thing that kind of happened, although the elite list has been more or less established for the UTMB races, coming up in August, because the lottery officially happened, they kind of quote unquote finalized those start lists. And so iRunFar has done the reviews. Maybe we'll link to the iRunFar previews for the UTMB races in our show notes, but they're deep fields. They're really, they always are, but right now they are like the women's race at UTMB, in part because Courtney Dauwalter is currently not on that start list. Like it's a really, really interesting race. Like Hillary knows she's in it, but you know, it's going to be Caitlin Gerbin and Hillary and Sabrina Stanley and Beth Pascal. And it's going to be nasty.
Ragna Devats.
Don't count her out. It's
she's amazing.
I'm really excited because I think it's going to be, not to say that like, you know, it's Courtney or nothing, but like have like this like person who set this like insane time on it, potentially not on that start list, and have this like just insanely deep women's field on the start line still. Like, I think that it could be a very engaging and exciting race where I think we might have some closer battles, which would be, I don't know, I think that elevates the sport a little bit, which is very cool for a storyline and getting to watch the race unfold, like type of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else in the news? It was kind of a slow news week, I would say.
Well, I just wanted to point out that there's about like twice as many men on the elite start list than women.
Okay. So here's my beef about that. Not that I wanted to race UTMB, because I'm going to do TDS on Tuesday, sleep all day Wednesday, and then do live commentary Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because that is a logical plan for the week.
Corinne, it's great to be able to have raced and then you just get to watch the madness. I know you know this, but still.
I'm going to sit in the studio and talk about it instead and not sleep for 3 days. It'll be great. But yes, the if you look at the start list, the men's list is far deeper, or like not necessarily, I won't say deeper. It's bigger. It's not deeper. And I think part of that comes down to how the UTMB index works. Because when the UTMB index is scored, women, like your time back from like the overall winner oftentimes is how that's factored in. And so like my 50K at Yakima Skyline is worth more than my 9th place at Western States. And so I technically, as a sponsored athlete, as a pretty okay ultra runner, I could not bypass the lottery as an elite to get in. I would have had to apply to the general lottery for UTMB. I could get into CCC, TDS, or OCC, but I did not have a high enough UTMB index score to get into UTMB.
Well,
and I think that is part of the reason why you see more men make the clearance of that UTMB score, is because like I think what was the ITRA score, which now is the UTMB performance index, I think it favors men and how it's scored.
What, just because there's more men that race?
There's more men that race, but also I think it's because your UTMB, that performance score has to do from time back from the winner, not the female winner, the male winner, your overall position in the race. So me being like top 5 at Yakima Skyline is worth way more than being 35th, many hours behind Jim Walmsley.
I see. Well, that's
being 45 minutes back from like a guy.
I haven't checked into mine, but my Western States got me a performance index, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So any race that has been a UTMB qualifier race in the past that was worth, 3 points or 4 points or 5 points, that's what those ITRA scores are based on. And that's what the UTMB performance index is based on as well. You get, because that's now a series race. This is like the complicated UTMB series that we're not going to help unconfuse people about. Western States is a World Series event. So now you have what's called a stone, and you can take that stone and put it into the lottery. Okay. So what used to be races that used to be worth UTMB points, and maybe this is like a really bad tangent, races that used to be worth UTMB points are now qualifiers. And then the 30 races, they just announced the final 3, none in the US. They announced 2 more in Europe and 1 in Australia. Transvolcania, a race in Sweden in November, and then a race in Australia in December got added to that World Series list. Those 30 races are World Series races, and doing them, like being top 3 qualify you as an elite for UTMB, or you get a stone for the lottery. So they basically inserted one more level between most races and UTMB, if that makes sense. So you still have to do the qualifiers to get the points, the UTMB index points, to do the series races, to do UTMB. So they've inserted one more level in the playing field, essentially, probably for money, but the way it is. And right now, the only World Series races for the US are Western States. So good luck, folks. And a race in Mexico in October.
Mhm. So, I stand by the decision for Western states to keep the extra golden ticket on the US soil. So maybe at least, we can get into some big races. But, because elites, right, to qualify for a race like UTMB, you have to run like these bigger races now.
For 2023. For
Right.
2023, you'll be
Mhm.
required to be top 3
Mhm.
in a World Series race or top 10 in a Continental Championship race. And they haven't
Mhm.
announced what the Continental Championships will be yet, but
Yeah.
that will be a whole nother thing where it's going to make qualifying for elites too also very hard, in
Mhm.
which it's further complicated as far as like you can, based on if it's within so many weeks of UTMB, you can actually use it for the following year, all that kind of stuff. It's very, I don't know. Can I say it's stupid? It's a little bit stupid, but that's neither here nor there. And I think that we can end my news rant, I guess, for today with that.
Okay.
Okay. So what we're going to do today is akin to talking about Hillary's story last week and akin to how we shared Logan Williams' story. In the past, we are going to intro an interview that we recorded with a really, really cool gentleman recently. And we're going to kind of intersect it a little bit to discuss things that he brings up in it. It's with this really cool guy, Richard Isa he's a run group leader. He's a community activist in Philly, and he's definitely the life of the party. Hillary, you got to lead that interview. Can you give us a little bit of a background about him and kind of what people are going to hear as we walk into this interview?
Yes, I think the first thing that you'll hear is just genuine excitement. Richard, he just has so much love for the community of running, and I think that's the one thing that really spoke to me about his segment story film, the broader topic of community. But he leads this It's a Run crew in Philly, and we talk about how that got started and what impact he's making from a social issue standpoint. When things happen in the world, how do we show up for one another, and how we can continue to do that for future generations to come, but use running as a means to do this, and it can be really powerful. But so that's kind of the main issue we talk about, and we go on many tangents, but also diversity in sport and what that looks like, and how we can support diversity, and what that looks like from us coming as 3 white women. How can we actually show up for others and actually increase diversity and inclusion in sport, and what that looks like.
I am Richard Isa Bukhari. Most people know me as Richard Isa. I am the son of Agnes. That's my mom. I'm the brother of Julie and Jenna. Those are my 2 sisters. I am the uncle of Jada and Riley. Those are my nieces. And child of God, first and foremost. So I said first and foremost, but I said that last. You get what I'm saying? That's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. So glad to have you on the show. We're really excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
Can you tell us a little bit about It's a Run Club and how it started, and mainly the importance that it holds to you and the community?
In 2017, I had been running for probably about like a year and a half. So I was like, I need my own, I run all the time. So let's get my friends together and run on Mondays. And it was called Running with Richard Isa. I'm telling you, I really love my name, right? So we would just meet on Mondays for 5K. I wanted to bring people that were new to running together and like give them a safe space for them to like get better and be together and do it as a community, yada yada yada. For the first few years, it was just my friends. so it kind of just grew to this thing where Mondays I got to hang out with my friends, which is awesome because I really, really love my friends. And as time started to grow, it kind of got stagnant. We'd have some people, like some new folks come in and out, but nothing crazy. And as the years went, there was this one Monday, I forget what exactly happened, but somebody was like, it's a vibe, and it's spelled ISSA. Like it's a dope pair of sneakers. So somebody hashtagged one of our runs, It's a Run Crew. And we just started using it. And then someone was like, yo, that looks better than Running with Richard Isa. And it just sounds better. And I was like, no, like I love my name. We can't change it. But then we changed it to Isa. I say Isa because it's my middle name, but everyone says It's a Run Crew. We started growing. attracting more people through the universe, making some weird turns. And yeah, now we like train together and we have merch and we put on events, and it's my baby, it's my child, this run crew. And I don't like to like give titles or anything, but like being the founder and captain of it, it's like one of my proudest accomplishments. Is it? Yeah, I guess I can say that. Yo, I've always been trying to bring people together in some way, shape, or form. So community's just always been a thing for me. In regards to running, it's I was lucky. Someone who I had met and became friends with, he invited me to one of their group runs. So I didn't have to go through that strange time when like you're new to a run club or crew or whatever, and sometimes they're not the most welcoming of people, and their cliques are already formed and you're kind of just there. And I've seen a couple of people have really bad experience, so I never had to go through that. And when I got my group together, I wanted to make sure that was never a thing. Like, if you come to run with us, like, you feel welcome. I'm going to welcome you with open arms. I'll engage with you. If you're slower, air quotes on the pod, I'll make sure I run with you. Like, you need to feel like you belong, because that's what this thing's about. So I always just want to make sure that people feel comfortable in our community, because that's what running should be about. To me, at least, is one of the bigger things that it should be about. In regards to tougher times, man, I always look back to 2019, which I don't really subscribe to bad days or months or years, but like, if I had to pick a year, it was 2019. Like, just life throwing all types of curveballs. But the times that I got to just let my guard down and escape for a little bit were those runs. And I tell my teammates, who are now my friends and some like family, like, you guys don't know, like, I understand you guys appreciate how much I do for the crew and the run community, but you guys have no idea how you guys got me through 2019, or helped get me through 2019. So yeah, that's probably the biggest time that I was like, oh man, this community thing is something that I not only love and want to be a part of, but I needed it. 19 was so shitty, and then 20 came. I knew that there were people who were struggling and they needed that sense of community. And if I could, for one day a week, give them a place to leave their whatever little ass apartment and be around human beings, because I think that's so important, to be around humans, we're doing it. I'm in love with running and everything that it can accomplish, because I've seen it get people through some of the darkest of times in their lives, and I've seen it get people from places of depression and rock bottom places, and running in some way, shape, or form lift them, whether it be them accomplishing something at a race or the community, which is what I'm trying to build. Running can change lives.
Okay, so that is a run crew that I want to be a part of, right?
Yeah.
We're all going
You
to Philly.
would say a
I know.
pun.
I think we all have. We booked our tickets to Philly yet? Should we call Richard?
Team trip, Trail Society, free trail. We're going to Philly, to a Philly run club near you. It's really cool to think about how, run clubs, like, have you guys personally been a part of a run club in Boulder, in Portland, and anywhere you've lived before where you are right now?
Totally. I mean, when I first moved to Boulder, I was enveloped by the running community there. Now, granted, this was back in 2015, so it was a long time ago. And it made me feel so at home. Like, I was moving there out of college, not knowing anybody. And I met this group of runners who, we all have one thing in common. And that one thing is something we all love. And so all of a sudden you have a bunch of friends. You have this community that you can like run with all the time, hang out with outside of running, talk to about like the good things in your life, talk to about the bad things in your life. And it really, like, it was amazing for me going there out of college and not knowing anybody. So I loved it.
Are you talking about Rocky Mountain Runners?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, because that's funny. That's where I met you, Keely. That's where I met you.
Yeah.
And I remember I still had this like photo. We were on like a muddy run, and like I was just getting into running in graduate school, and I didn't really know anyone. So it's the perfect thing. And I remember there's this photo that you and I have. It was a super muddy run, and we put like mud across, like underneath our eyes, like we're like football players, like, and I just remember those small moments, right? And it gives you the motivation. Like, we had Rocky Mountain Runners, or the main runs I went on was Monday nights. And so this is like Richard's, the Issa Run Crew run on Mondays. It's like, you know, you're dejected, you're back to work. But then you have the light at the end of the day to go to this run club.
Yeah, I mean, they're your community. They're like Insta friends. They make you feel like you belong, independent of like where you come from, what your day looks like, who you are. Like, I think that's what's really cool about it too, is like it's come as you are. And I think what resonated with all of us in this conversation too is that, like, man, not, you know, these run clubs or even just groups of friends that you run with regularly, like they get us through like the darkest times, the injuries, the loss, the death, maybe it's career stuff. Like, you get to lean into that community outside of family, outside of work, outside of all that stuff. And I think that to me is just so powerful about the running community in general, but also like having a club or a crew that you meet with regularly.
Yeah. And I think it's, for me too, it's how I'm not someone who, I do really love community, but I really like crave that intimate connection. So I think these run clubs or crews, it's a place you can meet people where you have something in common. It's already built into it. And then you can develop these kind of deeper personal relationships. And I think, I mean, the best way to get to know someone is a long run, right? Just share some hard miles on the trails. And, you know, you can really, I mean, I talk a lot when I run. So like, you know, I open up a lot. And yeah, I think it's great because then you can kind of find things that you have in common outside of running, but running is that common thread at first.
Totally. Yeah, and I think in Richard's case, Hillary, you quoted one of his teammates, but one of his teammates was saying how he was drawn to the Issa Run Crew because of his openness to all people, no matter their race, gender, religion, or running ability. And I feel like that just really drives the point home that like these running communities that we create are uniting people regardless of what they're doing outside of running based on just their joy and love for running. And I feel like that's really special. And I don't have like as much experience with that because in Boulder, it was like a lot of just the same person, right? A lot of the same person came to these group runs. And so hearing his story and like the kind of community he's fostering in Philadelphia is like really, really inspiring and really gives me hope and ideas for and how to like increase the community in other areas too.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of, you know, what is really interesting about his story and what we're going to hear more about building forward from this is like, how do you use that run crew to like show up with as representation in your community, to like to create that diverse space or to bring diversity into running and merge it with like the wholesome nature of running. Like, right, running is this like very wholesome thing. And I think that, you know, you can weave in other experiences into it and kind of break down that, you know, oh, it's the same person that's coming to this. And part of that's got to be community based, right? Like, we all live in bubbles. Some bubbles are more bubbly than others, or less, but I mean, like, are more, I guess, rigid than others. So really, really cool to see what they've been developing within their community in Philly. More like, like I said, we're all buying plane tickets. We're heading out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like his take on just diversity in the running space is super interesting. And definitely, obviously, he gives a lot of opinions around this that I don't have as much experience in. So it was really interesting hearing him talk about it. And so we can cut to kind of like Richard's thoughts around diversity in running and how that has manifested in his life and through his running community now.
Like, there's a whole generation of kids that could benefit from seeing representation in insert anything, right? So when I go to races, and this is actually how the run crew started expanding, there'd be, I'm at the starting line with a bunch of white dudes, cool, whatever. And I cross the finish line and I always turn around because there's always somebody that I'm trying to beat. So like, I have to turn around and hug them, like, thank you for letting me pass you because you served your purpose. God sent you here for me. But you know, I look around and it's just nothing but white guys still, right? And some white women come by and some more white people. but there would always be this one other African. Africans can tell. My parents are from Sierra Leone. I can spot an African a mile away. Manu, this guy Manu, I would see at every race, and he was the only other Black guy that would be, for the person that looked like me that would be finishing around the same time. So that's how kind of we connected, and we started running together, and that's when we started going to the track, and then IRC, Ice Run Crew, blew up. All right, but as I was saying, like it's there aren't. So in Philadelphia, it's a pretty Black city. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's more than your average city. But you, like I said, you go to these races and it's just a bunch of white people, and then you break it down from myself, and it's like I'm not the fastest person, but I'm up there, right? So now it's even less Black people. What representation does, and somebody seeing me up there with them, lets them know, like, oh, this isn't, there might not be a lot of us, but there are a few. There are a few. This isn't just like a white thing. There are some Black people that run it, and it might light the fire in somebody, under somebody's ass, to want to get out there and test this running thing out. But without representation, like, why in the fuck would anybody want to do this? Like, why would anybody want to step into this run world that has no one that looks like them, no one that they can relate to? And that's important, being able to relate to somebody. Like, you know, like, just imagine if there were, like, you were the only woman at every race. That would suck. It would be the worst thing ever. That wouldn't be a space that I think that you would want to volunteer yourself to enter every single, I don't know how often you trail people race, but, you know, it wouldn't be the greatest experience. So, you know, having that representation and having people that look like you, and I don't know, you have something in common with, it's really important. If not for, you know, adults, but like the next generation of runners, you want to let them know that this is a thing. So when I was growing up, in high school, especially, like I said, I went to a private Catholic school my whole entire life, and like I can name every Black kid on the. When we took the, I don't know if you guys did this at your high school, but you take the senior picture in the auditorium in the gym, like it's the whole class. Yeah, we did that, and there's a row of Black people. Like we all got together and stood there, and it's like all the white kids in this row, and we didn't even all like each other. But like, so anyway, so the track team, it basically went like, oh, you played soccer, you're Black, you're gonna sprint. What the fuck? I don't have options. Like I ran the 100, 200, and 400 in high school, and I feel like I should have ran the 400, 800, like going up a little bit. And I never would have. Like, looking back, I totally should have been running like these longer distances. But there was no one from what I saw being younger, I never saw anyone that looked like me running these races ever. So why in the hell would I even be intrigued about distance running? That's what the skinny white guys do. I don't want to do that. So representation could help that. You know, if there's a young Black kid that's not the fastest sprinter on earth, that maybe wants to dabble in some distance, if he sees people that look like him doing it, that might be the nudge that he or she needs to enter that world. So I think that's where representation can play a huge part, especially when it comes to like the future of running, because, you know, running's a popular thing. Lots of people do. It's very easy to do, right? Not easy. You know, once you add the race fees and the $700 super shoes, and anyway, but if you don't see the people doing this run thing look like you and are like you in any way, shape, or form, why would you be interested? Why would you not just go pick up a basketball or a football, or I don't know, join the dance teams? We're all runners, and it should be something so simple and wholesome and inclusive that everybody can literally do. And you know, I'm very protective of that. But wait, can I turn the table and ask you a question, because it's something that, and we, you know, we're in the world of being informed. What does, since 2020, when the world went to shit, what have things changed when it comes to diversity in the trail world? Because I know nothing about it. Like, trail running, for people that look like me, it's like, yo, that's some white people shit. We're not doing, like, at one point it was just a bunch of white people frolicking in the mountains or some shit, and it's like, that literally, that's some white people shit. I would never do that. But like, one thing the pandemic did do is it got Black folks outside, and I started seeing like more people hiking and stuff. And then I started following more people a little bit, and I started following some people that look like me that are running trails.
So from the very beginning of this thing that we started, right? Like, this has kind of been what we're trying to get to the heart of. Like, what does diversity look like in the ultra space? And as you know, as we've all said over and over again, like we're 3 white women. And so we can only speak from our personal experiences here and try to amplify voices of others to help all of us learn. But you know, we've talked about that, right? Like what are the current stats when it comes to female participation or racial minorities participation in trail running? Like what have we seen in that? I think Keely, you pulled some really good
Like
numbers
Richard,
there.
oh,
Oh, what do you want?
sorry. No, my
Oh.
thing just cut out, so I couldn't hear you talking.
Oh, that was really good though, I think.
It was really good.
I know. But I cut you off. I'll see if I can salvage it. Do you want to try to say it again?
No, but
I think it's salvageable.
I think it's salvageable.
Yeah. Because it was just
Okay.
the very end. So just correct it, like, and then, yeah, then Keely, you
Yeah,
can just
so I
kind of go
think-
for it.
I think you should be able to jump in with stats, basically, is what I asked. I said, like, so what do the stats look like right now?
But yeah,
Okay.
I think Corinna, you were saying, I think where you got cut off is you're like, I think Keely, you pulled some really good stats. If you just start
Say
there,
that
I think
again.
you could.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Keely,
Sorry.
it's okay. Keely, I think you pulled some really good stats on this. What do those current numbers look like for female participation or minority participation in sport, or like in trail running specifically?
Yeah, so shocker, there's no real stats on underrepresented or minority groups in trail running. So that's not great, but we do have some numbers on females. And so based off a study back in 2019, it looked like there was around 22% of participants in trail and ultra running were females. And so I guess if we think of that from a minority perspective, that means there's probably a very small percentage of underrepresented females in the sport, and we can probably translate over to males as well. So I'd say in a nutshell, we have a diversity problem in ultra trail running, which we definitely have come to this conclusion before. And I think this kind of goes across a lot of different countries. One specific example I found in the UK was that there's not a huge Black population in the UK, but they make up about 4 to 5% of the UK. And they found that the start percentage of Blacks at races was actually less than 1%. And so they've started a group there that seems really interesting that I will link to in this show notes here. And they are really trying to increase participation in the UK. We've also seen a ton of these groups pop up in the United States to try to start increasing diversity in trail running in the United States. And so I think we know there's a problem. People are now finally starting to try to make changes in the space. So I think we're trending in the right direction, but I don't feel good at where we're at.
Yeah, we had a really cool shout out this week on Instagram. I don't know if you all saw it, from Gemma. But I'm just going to read her Instagram post. I think that's fair. It's public. So here we go. It says, I was shocked to learn, based on numbers these legendary women of the sport have crunched. That's you, Keely, our number cruncher, that in 2019, only 15% of the finishers of UTMB's CCC were women. We don't know how tiny the percentage of those women were in fact women of color, because no one asks that sort of information in registration. But you can imagine, if you notice such things in the sport around you, how few that would actually be. This has given my entry as a woman and a woman of color a whole new meaning to me. I got some serious representing to do. So she will be at UTMB CCC in August. And I was like, oh, we're going to be cheering for you. So that's really cool though, that like people are seeing that instead of seeing that as, it's hard to be the first. It's hard to be the first. It's hard to be the only. We've heard that from our listeners, particularly our listeners of color. It's a really uncomfortable position to have, I think, in probably any field, sport or career or whatever it might be. But to take that and turn it to like, this representation matters. I'm going to be that person. Like that to me is like very, very powerful, and like many, many kudos and like support and applause and whatever we can do to encourage and continue to support people wanting to be that representation, so that other individuals, so younger athletes, see themselves on the trails, see themselves represented in sport. Like that to me is like so cool and so powerful. Like seeing that tag come through on Instagram, I was like this is what we're working towards.
And I mean, I can speak to it from, as a woman in sport, that it's so important to be able to see people like you out on the trails. I mean, someone that inspired me to get out there and try trail running, Emily Forsberg and Anna Frost. And, I felt like I could see myself in them. And so it encouraged me to do it. So that is from my perspective of why representation matters. And I can't help but think of Joe Gray. I mean, he's been doing some incredible things in the community. And he's he's a two-timer in the Colorado Hall of Fame for running. Mountain runner, like he has an incredible, pedigree and just an incredible race resume. And he's doing a really good thing for using his platform and, trying to increase diversity and representation in sport. I mean, he started this grassroots program called the Project Inspired Diversity in 2019. And so he's working to launch trail running camps and with race directors like Justin and Denise Ricks. They have this huge race series and to help, give young minorities and low-income families exposure to the outdoors. So I think, it's ironic because, you want representation matters, but someone like Joe Gray, he's been outward and public about the struggles that he's had with himself getting sponsored.
Yeah. And like Mario Mendoza has claimed similar things where he's had similar running resumes to a lot of other white male runners in the sport. And was unable for quite some time to land like a pretty good running contract. And since then has landed a good deal, obviously with Brooks, but he said it took him a lot longer than his male counterparts that were doing similar racing to him.
Yeah. And then we're seeing that I think we're seeing some really cool things coming out of the Seattle running community. There's a group that just launched called the Seattle Running Collective. And from their Instagram, they value collaboration, giving back, bringing new people into the fold, the next generation of runners, and centering people of color. So I think that really cool. I think that is, I don't know if it's led or spearheaded by Allison DeSayer, who works for Wazelle. She has a book coming out this year that you can pre-order now called, I believe it's called Running While Black. And she's been a very vocal advocate, obviously, for representation in the sport. So I think these are people to follow, to bring. If you're not following them, I would follow them. To bring that diversity into your feeds, into how you're interacting with the running world and the world around you. Because I think it's out there, and if you're not actively searching for it right now, I think that's something that we've all been leaning into or working on over the past year. I know I have, my feed has changed immensely over the past year for that reason, just trying to expose myself to as many viewpoints as possible.
Totally. Yeah. I think we could all use a little bit of a kick in the butt to start to do things that make us feel a little bit more uncomfortable and go out of our comfort zone to meet new people and to encourage more people into the space. And I really loved Richard's take on this when he started talking about how we could start to elicit change in this space and start increasing diversity and increasing our own knowledge about these spaces. And so let's clip to that now.
Just get comfortable being uncomfortable. And once you get comfortable being uncomfortable, push it to the limits. Just keep getting more uncomfortable. And what that can mean a lot of things, man. That can mean showing up to, I don't know what it looks like on y'all's end, but there are run crews that are people of color, created by and the majority are people of color. Show up to their run. What the fuck is stopping you from going to a different neighborhood to run with different people, right? What we need to stop doing is looking at, and this is all of life, not just running, but specifically, we'll talk about runners, is looking at the things that we don't have in common. We on this pod right now, we could find a million things that we don't have in common, right? But once you start counting what you have in common, you realize that life's beautiful. We all can and should get along. First and foremost, dickheads, we're runners. Hello, I didn't just solve world hunger. We're runners. That's it. We all like to do the same thing. And once you take that one thing in common, that desire to get uncomfortable, it's not as bad because you realize that you're not so different, and people, you can find a common ground and you can start having conversations. If you genuinely want to have these conversations, don't just have a checklist and it's oh, let me find a Black person. Oh, what does it feel like? Get the fuck out of here if that's your move. But start having these conversations with the desire to learn and do better. because all of us are out here. No one's perfect, right? We're all kind of trying to figure it out. Even myself as a African American in the United States, I don't have all the answers. Like I don't know how to get to the great utopia that I think I'm going to see before I die. I really do, but like that's a whole nother story for another day. I don't know how to get there, but I know what's wrong, and having conversations is a start. So I feel like if people are more open to making themselves uncomfortable, showing up to, you know, to events or runs, introducing yourself, it's so simple. Like, we're humans, man. Stop with all this. I understand like social media and these gadgets make everything so like the connections aren't as genuine and everything comes through this damn device, but it's like go talk to a human being. I promise you. Like, I like to talk, clearly, and I will tell you, right, people like to talk, maybe not as much as me, but like one instance, right, I will always ask people how they're doing, and if you ever want to piss me off, this is the conversation that pisses me off. Hey, how are you? No. I asked you a question, answer it. People just repeat how are you back because they don't even process like that they were asked the question, right? So I'm going on one of my rants, but I promise you it's going to come back. If you ask people how they're doing and you genuinely listen to what they're saying, oh, you'll hear a whole life story. People want to talk to people. Like, just talk to one another, have conversations, show up. Especially when it comes to running. Like, it baffles me that there could be like segregation in something so simple as running. Like, I take a city like New York, and I don't know if you've ever, I act like you're from like some other planet. Have you ever been to New York? Yeah, I'm sure you've been to New York, but like folks don't, I've gone up there, or I've mentioned to people like, yo, there's a crew uptown that runs every da-da-da, and they're like, that's too far. Like, make an effort. There's things like about making connections and meeting people, or maybe you're just, no, even if you are comfortable where you're at, fuck that. If you're trying to improve things and make things better, like I said, you have to get uncomfortable. Get on a train and go uptown and go run with some people that don't look like you in your little neighborhood in the Upper West Side. I don't even know if that's a bougie neighborhood. Yeah, it is. Upper West Side is bougie as fuck. Leave that neighborhood. I don't know what it looks like in trail running, but like, there's got to be like some black trail crew out there that so like I feel like a lot of people listening to this probably hit the trails. Like, just make an effort to want to give a fuck about people that don't look like you. Why would you not want to? There's a saying we have in the Black and African American community. It's like what is it? Oh, the getting invited to the cookout, right? Like, if like I would invite y'all to the cookout, that means y'all are down. Like, we accept you. Let me tell you about the metaphoric cookout and like the literal cookout. Cookouts are fucking fun. We have fun. Like, one thing you're gonna experience by interacting and getting to know some Black folk is that you're gonna have a good time. You're gonna eat good, and everything's great, right? We laugh. We laugh a lot. You like laughing. You've been laughing this whole time. It's on mute. It's kind of weird, but you're laughing, like all of you, right? So you want to get an invite to the cookout. Get uncomfortable. You know, make yourself accessible to some folk that don't look like you or might not. And it's not just Black folks. I just speak for what I am. The way I look at it is, right, as people of color, we want white people to figure it out. Y'all fuck this up, you figure it out, right? But I feel like there has to be somebody like that. Y'all, you can't Google the shit. I mean, you could. I'm pretty sure there's like some template on like how to end racism or some shit, right? But I feel like we make bigger steps if I'm willing to have these conversations as well. It's not my job. And there was a point in 2020 where I'm like, yo, white people, leave me alone. Because I did open up I posted on the gram, and I said on Chris Chavez's Sidious podcast, like, hey, 609-902-7354. That's my phone number. If you ever want to text, if there's something you don't understand and I could help you figure it out, like, and I don't have all the answers, but let's have that conversation. And y'all have my phone number now too. And it's always open. It's an open line. Don't abuse that shit, but like, it's there. It's not my job, but somebody has to help, or else it's y'all trying to figure shit out on your own. And I personally don't trust white people to figure it out on their own. Some maybe, but like there's some of y'all that like I don't want you guys taking matters into your own hands. So there has to be some willingness to help as African Americans and people of color. Whatever the minority is, there's got to be people within those communities. And I'm not asking, this isn't a roll call like, hey, who's stepping up today? But those conversations have to be had, and it can't just be with the people who are like, I guess the oppressors or like the majority. They can't be just figuring these things out themselves. There's been many of instances with the LGBTQ community. There's so much I don't understand. And if none of my friends that are homosexual or bi, if they weren't willing to have those conversations with me, I'm telling you, I'd be fucking clueless and making things up on my own. And that's the last thing you want, is for my non-reading asses to start making up my own theories and resolutions to problems or knowledge that I don't have. So yeah, it's not my job, but I feel like this back is strong enough. The good Lord gave me the strength to carry that weight. If you look at me and see my brown skin and then start judging, I'm gonna pray for you on Sundays and Wednesdays, right? But if it's like I don't see color in like we're all equal type thing, I don't really think there's anything wrong with that, especially if you're making the effort to, because I know what you mean, right? The saying like, I don't see color, like you can take that and have so many interpretations of it, but knowing that you're not out here like trying to judge everyone based off of the color that you see, because we're human beings, right? You see someone and I love the people like, I don't judge, like that, it's human nature or not. So if you're out here trying to learn about things and inform yourself and things like that, then yeah, don't see color, because you're trying to improve, and maybe you looking at it, maybe that's how your brain works or whatever. But if it's like, oh, he's black, he's gonna rob me, that type of shit, oh no, get out of here. Or like, oh, you know what I'm saying, any prejudice or type of like stereotype, we don't have space for that.
So I think we all, like, during that interview too, were like, the gears were turning actively. Like, what could we be doing? How can we be getting uncomfortable? Why aren't we going to other run clubs? What's holding us back from stepping out of that comfort zone? Like, how did that make you feel, like in that conversation, or even like listening back to it right now?
Yeah,
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
sorry.
No, I'm delayed, so it's on me.
Okay. I think for me, it made me really think about, where I live, and, so obviously I live in Boulder, and so maybe it's not as diverse as other places.
The Boulder bubble.
Exactly. But what's preventing me from going to Denver, to other places, and like engaging in different run communities, right? And I mean, that's something that I enjoy about traveling, is like engaging with the local communities there. So it's also just asking those questions of what can I be doing more from a local standpoint of where I'm based for the majority of the year. And because I think grassroots and starting local can make a pretty big impact.
Yeah, I mean, listening to that entire interview, I just felt really guilty because I don't have a good answer as to why I don't travel across the bridge in Portland or to different suburbs outside of Portland and try to experience their run clubs. So I don't feel like I have a good answer, but I think asking ourselves, like, if we're okay getting uncomfortable, and like, how can we make ourselves feel uncomfortable, is like a really good start. And I think for me, that is venturing out of my comfort zone and going to different areas and running with a bunch of different people, because I've done it before, not on purpose. So it's like, if I've traveled for work somewhere, sometimes I'll find random run clubs and I'll go running with them with no context of what part of the town they're in. But I'd say just from my own circular bubble of where I look on social media and who's introduced to me through different communities, it's all still very narrow, right? And so I think like somehow stepping out of our bubble and like finding these other groups will just be really important. But I don't think I have the right answer as to the best way to do that yet.
Yeah, we get comfortable, right? It's like, oh, these are the people that I run with. This is where I run. I run at these times. Like, we're ultra runners. We should be good at getting uncomfortable, right? Like, that's why we sign up for these silly races. We pride ourselves on being good at at like dealing with that. And yet we're all like, but we're also cozy. And, I'm in my sweater with my tea, and it's really easy to stay there. and to not have to branch out, besides when you're pushed to branch out, when you're traveling for work or when you're in a new place, because you're, I don't know, you're visiting family or whatever it might be. So I think that that's a really interesting, I think that asks a really interesting question. And obviously where you live is a huge part of that. I've lived in very bubble communities, very white communities, and I've also lived in much more diverse communities as well. I feel like my urban exposure in San Francisco has been very different from where I've lived previously in Montana and in Washington and in Wisconsin. To me, that was a stretch. It was the biggest place I'd ever lived, moving to the Bay Area a number of years ago. But I think it's been good to see and experience a different place, and to be involved in that. And one of the things that I try to be involved with here in the city to help stretch me on that was there's an organization, which is obviously, this is different than our conversation, called Back on My Feet, which works with unhoused individuals but they center running as part of that. And it's been really cool to show up that, like it's part of it. You show up, you go for your run. It's not a very big run, but you go for your run. They help with job placement. They help with temporary housing. They provide running shoes. They provide interview, like prepping for interviews and all that kind of stuff and getting job placements. But they center running as a way to kind of bring about change. And like that was, trying to get involved with that here in the city, starting pre-pandemic, and then trying to get back into it now has been a way that I've tried to stretch myself, to run in a different place, to run with different people, to run with a totally different community than the community I normally run with, to try to use running as the means of that thread that connects me to these people who have had a totally different life experience than my own. And so it's in a way, it's cool that we can use running as that commonality, in order to step outside of our comfort zones, because we have to care about people.
Yeah. And I think up until recently, running was always like the easy sport to do, right? You just needed a pair of running shoes and you could go out and run. And so right now I'm thinking about how complex a lot of the races have become at entries, and how expensive the entries are becoming, and all of the lottery systems, and how that is most likely resulting in an even less diverse population of people doing the races, because I don't even know how to get into half the races anymore. And so if someone's new to the sport and wanting to get into it the first time, but they have to pay, over $100 to get into a lottery for a race, like that just feels like a very hard barrier to get through if it's your first race. Like, I don't think you would do it.
Yeah. It doesn't make it accessible. That's a huge barrier to entry, I spent 20 minutes ranting about it in the news section today. So it's like, yeah, things are complicated for everyone, but I cannot imagine trying to get into the sport with that as the what has been set before you as the gates to clear for entry.
Yeah. And so do you guys know if Ultra Sign Up monitors like race? Because it would be interesting to talk with big race organizations and see if they can actually account for that when they're allowing registrants, and see if they can, cap it at certain ethnic groups. I mean, it sounds like a little bit crazy to try to do, but I think it would be an interesting way to try to moderate like who gets into races and increase participation by women and by minorities.
Yeah, I think so far that's not been a common thing in race registration. It'd have to be an optional thing, if anything, right? To disclose gender and race, as opposed to it should definitely should not be mandatory. That can be very alienating. But I do think that it'd be a very interesting thing to understand what does the population actually look like?
Right.
What is that? What is like, who is actually getting into races? Because I do think that, like our focus has been like, we're getting more women in general, all, quote unquote, we're working for all women. But as listeners have told us, all women doesn't always mean all women. Oftentimes that means white women. And so I do think that, we need to do whatever we can to try to elicit not just a change from a gender perspective or a gender representation perspective, but what does it look like for traditionally like minority groups within the sport as well? And part of that starts with monitoring, I guess, but doing that in like a not like invasive way.
Right. And just to answer your question, Keely, I just pulled up my Ultra Sign Up profile, and there's, obviously you ask and it can say, male, female, or non-binary. So that's something that you can click there, but there's nothing else kind of asking about race or ethnicity. So Yeah.
It'd be an interesting research topic. So any PhD students out there in gender studies, cultural, something social, like I don't know who would be doing that, but let's talk. Let's do a big, we could probably get a survey study off the ground for that. But I think it would help, right? Like you gotta like flip the needle one way to make change. And I feel like part of that's got to be flipping the needle as far as, as aggressively and as hard as we can in one direction to actually elicit that change. And some race directors are doing that from a gender perspective, as far as like trying to equal the lotteries, as far as like representation from for both men and women by either capping how many like making it 50-50 or making sure that the number of women in the lottery is represented in the start list, which I think is like that should be a minimum threshold in my mind. One thing I will say for really big races like UTMB, this is not designed to make it equal, but because of how the applications work, oftentimes they're clearinghouses for these big races in which the lottery isn't actually one big lottery. The lottery is oftentimes like a European lottery and an Asian lottery and a North American lottery, and X number of spots behind the scenes are allocated to regions. And that might mean that France gets extra things. Like that doesn't have to be equal, but oftentimes like part of why like races like UTMB have to do things like that potentially is because when there was for I think a time where there were so many Chinese athletes that were qualified for the UTMB lottery that the lottery was going to skew to be very like that many more entrants than normal would have been Chinese, because there were many more entrants than normal that were qualified for the race. So the race can do whatever they want. They don't have to make it equitable. They don't have to make it, oh, we're going to divide this perfectly evenly or based on representation, but they are manipulating things behind the scenes. And I think that one, transparency would be really good there so that we actually know how the lotteries are working if they're not transparent, and many of them are not transparent. And then two, like how can we increase diversity and representation via like maybe that means by controlling the lottery and not making it a perfect, like we're just drawing numbers out of a hat type of thing.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, we know right now that they're not using that back end magician math to increase the number of women participants. So clearly they're not doing it to increase diversity. They're just using it right now to bucket out nationalities, which proves that there's a means to potentially do it in the future, but it's not being done yet.
Yeah. And the whole thing feels a little bit icky, but I do think it's an area that we've talked about a lot, and we've praised many race directors for it, like the High Lonesome race directors for taking an initiative, for the Hellbender race directors for taking an initiative here, for the Hard Rock race directors and board for taking an initiative here. And I think that we want to continue that in the sport. I think we're seeing greater representation, particularly from a gender perspective in the 50K distance. But I think as races get longer, that's where we are trying to work even harder to get more representation.
Mm-hmm. And kind of, transitioning back to Richard's interview, talking about this is like, how do we use something as simple as running to create a platform for something bigger? And I think, kind of we're talking about this in its essence. And, we're talking about diversity in sport and representation for women. We're trying to make a bigger difference in the world and include more people in that, empower them with this, doing something hard, like running an ultra marathon. And hopefully that, transcends into other, areas of their life. But something that was really awesome, and we got to talk to Richard about, was using his platform and their run crew for other causes. And so we can kind of transition to that part and let you guys hear about what the ISSA Run crew did. Your entire group knelt for 9 minutes and in a busy intersection to commemorate George Floyd's death by a Minneapolis police officer. And I think, that's a way that you can, show up not only for your local community, but an entire, country's community. Yeah. It's kind of an open-ended question, not really a question, but just can you, talk us through that?
Yeah. So 2020, man, I feel like that was like 12 years ago, but the world was going to shit between the pandemic and like crazy racist all over the damn place. Like, what the fuck is going on? And Global Running Day was coming around. I don't even know what day it is. It's such a talk about made up holidays, right? Everyone hates Valentine's Day. Global Running Day. I run every day. Anyway, Global Running Day was coming, and my buddy Tim Downey, who's actually in Boulder with you, but he hit me up on the text message and was like fuck running, like what that's the last thing we need to be doing on Global Running Day, and like let's raise awareness somehow, like let's march, right? Because everyone, I don't know what was going on where y'all were from, but every protests were every day in the cities of, especially like New York and Philly. It was, you know, the streets were flooded with marches and protests, and sometimes, you know, the looting and all that type of madness, but shit was going on. And he wanted to use Global Running Day as a space and a place to use running for a good cause, and, you know, say less, bro, like let's go. So we simultaneously planned runs or marches at the same time, him in New York, me in Philadelphia, and I put the bat signal out to Philadelphia running. Philadelphia run community is weird, man, and like the clubs and the crews don't really like, they talk about community, but people don't like come together and do shit. So I am never scared to put on an event or anything. That's what I do. Like I said, I've done parties before. So with me, it's like, hey, I'm putting this together. Come if you want. This is different because it has nothing to do with like me or my crew. I don't know how you feel about us, but there's a bigger end game here. So that day, man, I remember driving into the city. I live in New Jersey, like 15-20 minutes from Philly, so I always have to drive over, and torrentially downpouring, and like it looked like the world was going to end. So I'm like, fuck, like I'm going to be marching down the parkway by myself. This is going to be the worst march ever. First march, worst march. But I showed up, and it was about a group of like 20-25 people, lots of different clubs and crews represented. I didn't know most of these people. I'm not like Malcolm X civil rights leader, like that's not really my lane. So I didn't even know what to do. It was just like hey, we're going to do this. We're going to march down the parkway. I had no end game whatsoever, but maybe afterwards, oh yeah, freestyle it. And I was like, afterwards, maybe we can all like go to the Rittenhouse Park. It's like a bougie ass area of the city, and exchange like information. If you have any organizations that you might know about, we can share those, and everybody can like just, I don't know, text each other and if find places to donate, yada yada yada. That was the plan. March, talk, bye, see you later. So we're marching. Vibes and the energy were great, and we get to Rittenhouse Square where we were about to just pull off and do the chatting and exchanging of information. John Lyons, a good friend of mine. He's a nutcase, but he's a great guy. He comes up to me while we're approaching this intersection of 18th and Walnut. It's like the busiest damn intersection in Center City. And he's like, we're going to take a knee at the intersection and just disrupt traffic. And I'm like, all right. I guess that's what we're doing. Like you know, I there was really no time to discuss it or talk about it. There were cops all over the place because, like I said, protests were happening, and John took a knee. I followed, and the rest of the group just followed suit. And there were about 20 to 25 of us, and we held up traffic for 9 minutes. And let me tell you, kneeling on the pavement for 9 minutes fucking hurts. But you know, that the symbolism of it all. You don't really care about the little bit of pain you're going through. And yeah, we did that. Afterwards, the police officer pulled me aside, and everybody kind of stood and watched because they didn't know what the fuck was about to happen. Traffic's blocked for blocks and blocks down the road. And he's like, is there anything else you guys want to do here? And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Because at that point, people were not very friendly with the police. I'm not an irrational person. I understand that not every cop out there is a dickhead. And I was like, I mean, I guess we're going to go to City Hall because we had heard that there were other protests going on. So he got on his walkie at that point. A female who was a photographer for Runner's World or a freelancer or something, she took pictures and asked what was going on. In that little bit of time that we were having that conversation, that police officer, I forget his name, Sergeant something, he had called bike escort for us to get from where we were to Center City to continue marching, but he wanted us to be able to do it without anybody interrupting us or bothering us. So that was pretty awesome. When the officer was done talking to us, I kind of looked at everybody and like I said, I have no problem speaking in front of people, but I'm not Mr. Civil Rights. And like everyone was just kind of waiting for me to say something. So I'm like, look around. Like if you see a photo of us kneeling, I'm like, look around. This is a march about some fucked up shit that happened in our country, brought to you by the running community, and it's all white people. This is what I go through every day. Like this is if you want to see what representation looks like in the run world, this march against like white supremacy and racism is it. I'm alone in this. And we got to another protest and we protested some more. That was not in the playbook, but it was a day of protesting for Global Running Day. And yeah, that's how we ended up in Runner's World. using our running to what's the word I'm looking for? Amplify our voice. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that's interesting here for all of us is that as runners, particularly as runners with a growing platform, like I think it's like we almost in a way have like a responsibility to stand for something or kneel for something in this case. And so, I mean, be it diversity or inclusion, or be it environmental initiatives, like I think this is something like running can be. I mean, running is inherently selfish too. It's like my time in the woods by myself and with my dog. Like it's very selfish, but at the same time, like it doesn't have to just be that. It can be so much more. And I think that, like, to me was a very powerful kind of like full circle idea of like what running can be. You can get uncomfortable. You can use it to branch out. You can use it to find common connections, and you can use it, particularly in our cases with like a little bit of a platform or a big platform to share messaging, to share important information. And I'm wondering, how do you feel that responsibility as runners, as professional runners in particular?
I mean, absolutely. I feel like you just said, Corinne, I mean, running can be so selfish. And I have that thought quite frequently. Like, why am I doing this? Like, is this just is it just some selfish thing? Like have a bad day and I wake up at 5 a.m. and I text Corinne, like, what's the meaning of this? Sorry.
What's the meaning of life? I'm going for a 20-mile run. Yeah.
But, but then there's got to be more. And I think the coolest way, you can, using these platforms and trying to reach other people, I think they think that's the coolest way to be able to impact others and grow the sport, not from a personal gain standpoint, but from just a betterment of, human society on a whole. And maybe that's naive of me, but I genuinely believe that. And something as simple as running, I think can provide that, whether it's, self-acceptance and, being fulfilled and be feeling powerful in oneself, then that can kind of increase and grow throughout a community. So absolutely, it's something that I think about. So then with this, it's like, then how in the world do I, help and become more diverse and, reach other audiences and encourage running outside of this bubble at which I live in? Like doing some collabs. Like, what about, Issa Run Crew training for something like the Gorge Waterfall 50K or, something like this, or, certain races have, Gina Lucrezi, she's going to be she's the RD now for Lake Sonoma. They have a women's only half marathon. So like something like that, where we can kind of get other people into, the people that aren't, the people that are already in the sport, experiencing trail running and what that looks like. And, I think it starts with these conversations and then having ideas, us buying plane tickets to Philly and then see what happens.
Yeah. And I think Richard speaks to this really well too. I think he highlights the fact that we're allowed to ask for help when it comes to broadening our knowledge around diversity. And I think that same notion holds true for when we want to broaden our reach and broaden who we interact with, right? We're allowed to ask him or other groups we know for help to expand our circles, because it's hard to expand your circle when you're in your circle. And so if we can continually ask people to help us broaden our circle, so that we can learn and that we can help and we can showcase these new sports to people who might not know about them. Like that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that continual search for representation or sharing the sport with different communities. I'm thinking of like how brands can be actively involved here and how the brands that we work with can do this. And I feel fortunate that working, although I run for Adidas Terex, the Adidas team in general, like because of their run clubs that are metropolitan based, that are, in these big cities, they've tried, that is something that they're working on, of doing like, okay, we're taking the Adidas run crew to the trails. Like we're doing a trail day, or we're going to a trail race. And I think that is so cool to have that run club that's, that generally shows up to half marathons or marathons, whatever it might be, to be like, hey, we're actually going to go do this all together, which I think is really like a big way for it to be welcoming to other people too, to be like, oh, I'm going to go do this with people who I run with, who I know, who I trust, and be introduced to new people and new places. It's like, I feel like that's very safe, like a safe intro in that way, but to bring people from these areas that might not normally get out to the trail. And I'm appreciative of run clubs that are brand affiliated or not, doing that and making that part of their thing. So we need Issa Run Crew to come to the trail. We're gonna sign them up for a trail race. They don't even know it yet.
I was just gonna say, I think it's very interesting then talking about brands, because not all of them are highlighting the underrepresented groups in the sport well anyways. And so obviously if you look at a traditional outdoor magazine, you're not going to see large amounts of underrepresented people in those ads, right? And so I think Richard really touches on this, is that brands can do it in an authentic way, or they can do it in an inauthentic way. And I think by really investing in athletes who are in these underrepresented groups and telling their true stories and showcasing that they care about their story and they care about the person, that will gain the credibility of the audience, instead of just all of a sudden, starting a campaign that increases their diversity without actually telling the story of why and who these people are and why it's important and all of these things. And so, yeah, I think it's just an interesting space, because brands, you can tell, are jumping on the diversity bandwagon. And I think some are doing it correctly and some of them are not doing it.
Are
well.
Inauthentic, I think, at times.
Completely.
Is what it is. It reads as tokenism and being inauthentic. And I think I would not want to be in the marketing shoes right now, but I do think that it's like it needs to be something that's being actively addressed and actively thought about, and but done in a way that is actually supportive of these athletes and their communities, and not just a brand grab, which it feels so much like a brand grab half the time.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's the main thing that we get from Richard's story and his run crew, is that authenticity, and that he's, kind of, to go back to that quote from the very beginning, is that is what draws people to his run crew, is that he's accepting no matter race, ethnicity, religion or gender. And I really hope that, everyone can go out and watch this segment story featuring Richard and his Issa Run crew, and kind of get that feel for the community. And hopefully it inspires you to kind of take more action on your own community level. Okay.
So last but not least, our Society Slam, brought to you by Oura Ring. I'm out in Flagstaff, Arizona, at altitude. I was in Tahoe for a couple of days before I came out here. So a couple more days at altitude. I'm heading into a training camp with my Adidas Terex team. We're going to drop down in elevation to Sedona, which I'm very excited about, for some warm desert running. But I'm wearing my Oura Ring in part because I wanted to really track, if I was recovering coming up to altitude, if I was sleeping well coming up to altitude. Some of you remember that I had a weird health scare a couple of weeks ago in which I got put on massive doses of prednisone. And I was not sleeping at all for a good 10 days because I was on steroids. But it's been cool to kind of see those numbers recover, to feel like I've gotten to altitude and that I'm in a good spot, that I'm feeling good, and that the numbers are backing that up. We're going to do an episode down the road here where we deep dive into some of this stuff, but it's been really cool to have this easy wearable that's allowing me to track what's going on a little bit, and at least more than anything, confirm I'm feeling bad or confirm I'm feeling good, and kind of just monitor what's going on in a way that isn't necessarily prescriptive, but is just allowing me to make some good decisions kind of week to week more than day to day. What do you guys got for some slams?
I was just going to say, the ring is also a lot less bulky than like a Garmin and a watch. So I kind of love it. You forget you're wearing it.
Yeah,
so
it's nicer
pretty.
to sleep in. I don't sleep in, like I wear a big Garmin watch, the biggest that they make, because I like the map feature. It looks insane, but I can't sleep in it. It drives me bonkers. Yeah, like that, those big guys. So this has been really nice to wear, something that I can wear all the time, that I can wear when I'm sleeping and not feel like it's getting in the way of anything.
Yeah. I have a society slam. So this is a very short one, but it's in regards to our episode last week. And I had someone reach out saying, this is a society slam. So I figured I would read it because it was beautifully written. And so this person is recovering from having a procedure done. And so they're not technically injured, but they can't currently walk very fast, let alone run. And so while they were listening to our episode, they said they burst into tears because we were talking about accepting that your body just needs rest. And this person was feeling like they needed to find all of these other exercises to push their body through while they couldn't run or walk. When at the end of the day, after listening to our episode, she realized that all they needed to do was rest. And so she was really, really happy that we brought this episode out in such a timely fashion for her to be able to accept that she just needed to rest for a little bit while she was recovering from this procedure. And yeah, I kind of just wanted to showcase that because I hope that we helped a lot of other people come to those terms too, because it's not easy to come to those terms by yourself.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Hugs. We're giving virtual hugs out to everyone
Yeah.
who may or may not be injured right now, who needs them.
And speaking of injuries and recovery, maybe if you're going through something, you can check out my segment story film that Strava did. I was super happy that, even when I had this big goal and an unexpected injury came my way, that Strava decided to stick with me and, still record kind of this bigger story about injury recovery and what that looks like for athletes and battling with self-identity. And I've received so much positive feedback from the film. Luke Webster and Cody Coleman here in Boulder, they just did an amazing job kind of telling this story. And so one particular comment I'll just read. I just want to read it. So I just watched your Strava segment video and wanted to say it is amazing. It's so incredibly well done and it's so moving. She's a runner. So she said, it was beautifully created and the strength and honesty you shared is just so powerful. My husband even watched it too. And he's lacing up his running shoes right now.
Yes.
That's so great.
Reaching masses. It's really cool. If you have not yet seen it, we're going to link where the Strava segment films and articles are coming out in the show notes. So please go check it out. They're really, really cool. We're going to continue to share more stories from those Strava segments in the coming weeks. We're really excited. We've recorded some good interviews and we cannot wait to share them with you. But in the meantime, if you want to get a hold of us, you know how to do it. Slide into our DMs, shoot us an email, find us on Twitter, whatever you need to do. We're really excited to hear from you and we cannot wait to welcome you back in just a couple weeks.